560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So we went from threats of finishing the job and even blowing up Oman at President Trump's cabinet meeting on Wednesday to a Iranian drone strike in Kuwait yesterday. Trey Yingst reporting, Fox News.
A significant development overnight after Iran launched drones toward a commercial vessel attempting to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. A U.S. official tells Fox News that 4 one-way attack drones posed a threat and were shot down. Then a strike was also conducted against a control station near the city of Bandar Abbas that was about to launch a 5th drone. In response, the Iranians launched a drone and missile attack against Kuwait, targeting a U.S. base there, according to Iran's IRGC. Now, the Kuwaitis confirmed an attack on their territory that did trigger sirens. The exchange of fire comes amid efforts to reach a deal between the United States and Iran.
And then a few hours later, you have this reported possible memorandum of understanding that we're waiting to see what Trump does with it. 60-day ceasefire agreement, unrestricted Strait of Hormuz shipping, no tolls. Iran removes the mines in the strait within 30 days. Assuming they know where they all are, which is one of the questions that we've had for a while. And do we know where they all are? Are we just going to trust them? And if we know where they all are, how are we doing in removing them? Because I thought that was part of the operation that was ongoing as well. Questions bound. That's number 3. Number 4, U.S. naval blockade lifted with conditions. And number 5, Iran pledges no nuclear weapons. Well, and of course, there'll be a lot of details to that, including arrangements for obtaining the enriched uranium. That's a framework. The president may be feeling more pressure on particularly getting the strait open, though, even though he's, of course, projecting that he is not concerned about the midterms and not concerned about these pedestrian economic matters, because oil prices will drop significantly as soon as this matter is properly concluded. And the important point, not just for the short term, but for the long term, is that this matter is properly concluded. But some oil CEOs are expressing some real concern about circulation of crude in the global market. For example, Mike Wirth, the CEO of Chevron, warned oil prices are likely to rise over the next 2 months as already near record low crude inventories continue to decline. He said at a conference, quote, "The buffers and the shock absorbers are steadily being drawn down, and the ability for the market to absorb this imbalance is drastically diminished today versus where we started. Over the next few weeks, we're likely to see those pressures flow through more directly to physical prices, and there's more upwards pressure that I would expect as we get into June and certainly into July." So supplies down, demand up means prices spike is essentially the translation. Another oil exec said it will take at least 4 months to get back to 80% of pre-conflict flows, and full flows will not return before the first or even second quarter of 2027. And Exxon Senior VP Neil Chapman took it one step further, saying commercial inventories of crude oil, of liquids, commercial inventories of crude oil, of liquids, think petroleum, gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, they've all run down. And running down those inventories has mitigated or offset, supplemented by the release of strategic petroleum reserves, which most of the Western countries have done. All that has mitigated the impact. You can model this. We modeled it. I think a lot of people in the industry have modeled it. We are approaching unheard of inventory levels. I mean, really, really low levels. You can debate whether that's going to hit these really low levels in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Once you get to that point, then you'll see price shoot up. A model would say dated Brent will shoot up. Once you get to that really low inventory level, up to 160 or 150 or $160 a barrel, dated Brent. The models would tell you that. And then what happens is when the price gets to a certain level, demand destruction brings it back into balance. Prices go so high, it becomes unaffordable, and that's what happens. And so we're at that level now. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that has to be factored into the calculus, but there are a lot of variables. And I don't know if that is motivating some sort of established framework that buys more time, but gets the Strait open right now as they work out those other details. I don't know why this is the only way to get the Strait open based on many of the military experts we've talked to. If we wanted to open it, we could, but President Trump seems particularly resistant to using force to do so. For more on all this, we're pleased to be joined by retired Brigadier General John Teichert, foreign affairs and military strategy expert who served as commander of Joint Base Andrews and Edwards Air Force Base, senior U.S. defense official to Iraq, and Assistant Deputy Undersecretary of the Air Force for International Affairs. General Teichert, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Ian, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So the framework, this potential MOU that the president may or may not sign on to, what's your assessment of that framework?
Dan, I'm an eternal optimist, but I'm skeptical. But I do know the president has to be weighing two primary factors here. Number one, Iran is notorious for acting and negotiating in bad faith. In fact, we're 7 weeks into a 2-week ceasefire, and the only precondition to the ceasefire from 7 weeks ago was that they would open the Strait of Hormuz, no strings attached, and we never saw that come to fruition. So number one, the president has to understand that Iran is not a trusted actor. Number two, people talk about how the devil is in the details, but I say purgatory is in the phasing. And where we went massively wrong with the Obama deal is that Iran got the benefits of the deal before they had to demonstrate the commitment to the deal and hold up their end of the bargain. And we have to structure any deal that may come to fruition in a way where Iran demonstrates commitment before they get any benefits to the deal. And I really hope the president is wisely considering those two primary factors before he puts his signature to paper.
Yeah, I mean, I would think, I mean, this sort of the implication is that the specific performance will be with the Iranians first, that the Strait is opened and there are no tolls and there's no piracy. And so let's see that. And then we talk about enriched uranium and the nuclear program and the rest of it.
I think that's right. And I do get added concern with just the activity that you described from the Iranians this week with respect to drones, mine laying, missiles, and emplacing of those missiles. And I think that's Iran testing how eager we are to make a deal. And I think we are falling over ourselves, indicating that we want to make a deal without returning to military activity. And that puts them in a stronger position.
Yeah, I'm a little perplexed. I mean, I understand the concern about putting our military men and women in harm's way, and that's not something that should never be taken lightly, and I'm sure is not being taken lightly by this president. But it just seems to me that there's a reason we have the military, and this is one of them to affect our national security interests. And is it certainly worth considering that the best, fastest way to address the Strait issue is for us to get in there and address it ourselves?
Dan, I think that's reasonable. And I also think that we left something on the table during the first 6 weeks of the war, and that is that we gave them a sanctuary and didn't strike the targets that were most important to the regime. On day one of Air War College, we are always taught that the way you use air power strikes is to hit at the heart of what matters most to a regime. And while we struck a lot of operational and tactical targets, we didn't hit at those things that actually underlie or underpin the strength of the regime. And I think in addition to active kinetic activity that would forcibly open the strait, that we should start striking at those type of targets the moment we see in the end game of this negotiation, Iran negotiate or act in bad faith yet again.
Do we have any sense of where we are? I mean, I haven't heard from Admiral Cooper on this recently, where we are with respect to the mines in the strait. You know, one of the contingencies there in the MOU is to remove the mines from the strait. But I thought that was underway. We were going to get some help from the UK, one of their mine sweepers. And you know, this was a laborious process. It's a lot easier said than done. I understand that, you know, conceptually. But is there any? I haven't seen any assessment of how we are with respect to that issue, and how long it would take for us again to do it ourselves or in conjunction with our allies.
We have capabilities, as do our allies, but the moment that Project Freedom stopped, that two-day adventure that seemed to demonstrate some level of hope, and then we stopped abruptly, the moment that ended is the moment that we stopped actively trying to use our assets to demine the strait. So we're basically at a standstill from where we were from the beginning of this conflict, and those mines are still there. And while we do have assets, it's a very laborious process to demine a waterway. And I think that we have been cooling our heels since we stopped Project Freedom, and it would take some time to get restarted and then to clear those mines.
I mean, do you have any sort of particular intuition about why you think the president is so seemingly averse to kinetic action, as the phrase is used? I mean, there's a lot of supposition, maybe too deferential to, or maybe too is a value judgment, but deferential to Gulf state allies, wants to keep the coalition together, that this is the path of least resistance, and for the short term, we've given up the idea of regime decapitation. It's just hard to reconcile the approach that's being taken and over the time period over which it's being taken, particularly when you start to hear pronouncements like you've heard from the oil companies that I mentioned.
So I think there are two factors that weigh into the president's mind. Number one, he is concerned that Iran will increase strikes on Gulf partners, especially their energy infrastructure. But I want to remind your listeners that 80 to 90% of Iran's strikes on the Gulf partners have already been on civilian infrastructure. So I actually think that's already played out. We've mitigated it appropriately. Number two, I think the president has in his mind, how can he most quickly decrease energy prices? But the problem is, this has now been dragging on far longer than anyone expected. And if we would have taken the stronger kinetic activity up front, there would have been a shorter-term higher spike in prices, but it would have been done with once we finished the job. And I believe the president needs to finish the job.
Yeah, it's interesting. This from a guy, a fund manager, but who's got colleagues in the space, in the energy space. He posted on X, according to my colleagues, recent meetings in Dubai, UAE, for example, is building out is crude pipelines and will be able to completely avoid the strait in 24 months for oil experts. Remember, nobody building the off-ramps has an incentive to advertise this, so the public narrative understates the real magnitude and timeline. So for the U.S., the details of any current deal matter less than people think. The U.S. doesn't need all of its ask granted in this deal. It just needs a deal that, one, reopens the strait, and two, buys time, because you have the Gulf Coast states that are building capacity now that the strait card has been played by the Iranians to build the logistics and capacity to avoid the strait altogether, so that this is a card that is no longer in the Iranians' deck within the course of the next year to 2 years. maybe that's something, too, that is under consideration, such that we need to make a show of force here. But if we get the strait reopen and we buy time, then the Iranian regime in the medium term, if not the short term, is going to collapse anyway, because it has alienated its Gulf state allies. They're looking for other routes that don't involve the Iranians. They're going to have to look, the Iranian oil clients are going to have to look for other suppliers because of the industrial base destruction that's occurred and the disalignment of other Gulf state actors. And so again, it goes back to, we just get the strait open and we buy time, and we don't have to take the risk of military action in terms of casualties. We don't have to indulge the expense and the use of our weapons caches, and we let this play out over the next year or two, with the Gulf states essentially taking the lead on it.
Dan, I'm okay with some of that elongated timeline, but two factors have to be considered here. Number one, will Iran actually open up the strait, no strings attached? I'm skeptical, and I hope that in phase one of this agreement we see that happen, but I doubt that it actually will play out the way we hope. And then number two, none of that factors in what Iran could do in the next 2 years with its nuclear program. And I think that we decimated it back in June in Operation Midnight Hammer of last year, but I think 2 years is a long time to give them a sanctuary to reestablish that nuclear program. If we could genie blink 2 years from now and have that added capacity via pipelines away from the strait, and we found a way to destroy their nuclear program, that would be great. But it's contingent on Iran opening the strait now to get there and us doing something about their nuclear program.
He is retired Brigadier General John Teichert, foreign affairs and military strategy expert who served as commander of Joint Base Andrews and Edwards Air Force Base. Also as a senior U.S. defense official in Iraq and Assistant Deputy Undersecretary of the Air Force for International Affairs. General Teichert, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Dan, thanks for having me.
And General Teichert joined us on the AlphaWealthGroup.com answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Francis Scott Key wrote of a flag that refused to fall, a powerful reminder that freedom endures only when it's defended. Now, a new documentary explores President Trump's fight to protect America's constitutional republic. Sunday night on